Finally, today we're in the heart of summer, which means that pest pressure is at its highest. So today, SUNUP's Curtis Hare is visiting with Dr. Jonathan Cammack, our OSU Extension livestock entomologist, for some management tips.
We're here with our OSU Extension livestock entomologist, Dr. Jonathan Cammack. And Jonathan, New World screwworm obviously has been kind of the talk of the town when it comes to insects. But you know, we are entering the early July months. It's hot outside, insects are out. So what are you hearing right now for livestock producers?
Right, it's kind of the same old thing for our summer pests. There's certainly a lot of things in the news right now, and kind of flying around about, right, pun intended, right, yeah. about other topics. But ticks are certainly a big deal right now. We're getting a lot of information, reports from a lot of the country right now, and claims that ticks are a lot more numerous than normal. And that's a little bit of a difficult one for us to actually answer in terms of whether or not it's a bad year for ticks. Really, because when we think about tick life cycles, we're thinking 2 or 3 years worth of kind of exposure in the environment. So we can't say oh, it's going to be a bad year for ticks, because we really got to think about what those earlier life stages of the ticks were being exposed to as they were developing last year or even the year prior. So it's really hard for us to make that prediction. Now, what we do know is that tick numbers started to increase a little earlier than we would typically anticipate. So likely due to the kind of mild winter that we had. Even though we had a nice, cold snap, it maybe wasn't quite long enough. So we're certainly still seeing some issues with ticks.
And when it comes to management of ticks, a lot of these things, we have years where tick numbers seem to be higher, where they seem to be lower. Same thing with horn flies. But really, it's summer here in Oklahoma. So what type of treatment options are you recommending for producers this time of the year?
Right, so it's, we really have to think about tick management in kind of that IPM framework, or what can we do kind of all encompassing to really have the best chance at managing them. Now, things we can do for our livestock is kind of keep them away from tall vegetation, tall brush, tall grass, things they're not eating. So if you've got a pasture that's bordered by a heavily wooded area, maybe set up a temporary hot wire or something to keep those cows a little bit further away from those trees that they don't need to be in, but still give them some shade, maybe out, from your big shade trees out in the middle of your pasture or something. But we want to try to keep them out of those wooded environments, or environments where we've got high populations of eastern red cedar.
And I mentioned New World screwworm, but there are other flies in the environment, obviously, that can cause quite a lot of issues, particularly horn flies and livestock. So talk a little bit about that and what kind of what you're seeing this time of year, and some management options.
So kind of statewide right now, we're right in the throes of high hornfly numbers. So our producers need to make sure that they've got some sort of a management plan in place. And we typically want to think about dealing with hornflies from both aspects. The adults, those are the ones that are present in blood feeding on the animals, and then the immatures or the larvae, those are feeding in the manure pats. So if we could take the approach of some sort of on-animal treatment, whether that's a spray or a back rubber or an ear tag, that's great for the adults, but it's not going to do anything for those immatures. So if you can feed a mineral that's got an insect growth regulator, a feed-through product in it, that'll pass through the digestive tract of the cow, end up in the manure, and will help provide some control for those developing hornfly larvae.
So when it comes to these treatment options, and with screwworm that we've been talking about, is there any crossover at all with treatment options if when screwworm were to arrive in Oklahoma?
Yeah, they all kind of go hand in hand. So the pests that we've talked about so far, hornflies, ticks, and stablefly and even horseflies, right? They're all blood feeding, so they're causing some sort of a very small wound on an animal, whether that's a cow or a dog or a goat or a sheep, when they're blood feeding on them. And those small wounds can actually serve as the kind of infestation site where a screwworm can actually initiate an infestation if that wound gets infected. So we want to make sure that we've got a good management plan in place for the flies and the ticks that we're already dealing with, to help us have some preventative care in place for dealing with screwworms. And kind of a fun fact, the ear tags that we use now for hornfly management were actually originally developed for managing Gulf Coast ticks in the ears of cattle, because those massive wounds that the ticks were causing on the ears of cattle were serving as infestation sites for screwworms.
All right, thanks, Jonathan. Dr. Jonathan Cammack, OSU Extension livestock entomologist here at Oklahoma State University.